title of this program is American, Female, and Muslim. How do you personally connect with these three identities?
I mean, I guess I can start.
Go right ahead.
I think that being an American Muslim woman is very interesting because it is kind of like the intersection of so many different identities, and it is quite the experience, right? Because we don't know when we leave the house in the morning if we are going to face violence because of our gender, or if we're going to face violence because of our religion. Black Muslim women, for example, have race compounded on that, or they don't know if they're going to be targeted for their skin color. And especially with the heightened tension in today's society, especially with the rhetoric, the way that the elections are going, I think that being an American Muslim woman today really means being a walking target. For us, we are the most visible religious minority within the Muslim community, especially if we choose to wear headscarves. We are visibly identifiable for our religion, and because of that, it's like, you know, not only are we walking targets, but we also wear the flag of Islam on our heads. So it's an unfair, I guess, responsibility placed on us to represent our religion, right? And in that way, I feel like we are an extension of our community. We are the face of it. And because of that, we're the ones that bear the brunt of the way the pendulum swings in our society at any given moment.
I actually think I have it so much easier than you guys because I don't cover, and so people just look at me and they're just like, she's just a brown girl, we're figuring it out, you know? And so there's like, I think just a fair amount of confusion. Sometimes I get Greek, and that's a fun day, and it's the schnoz. But anyway, so, you know, it's funny, I tweeted something today that kind of reminded me of what it's like to be, reminding me of one of the central tenets of what it is to be Muslim, and I think that I tweeted something really stupid, which was something like, "Is it just me, or does is gun or does Hello Kitty have the same amount of regulations as guns?" And really dumb, right? Anyway, and you guys are like, yeah, that's really fucking stupid. Okay, but so I tweeted this thing, and then a conservative talk show radio host tweeted it out, like he's like, no, it's just you, whatever. And so then all of his followers tweeted at me like, you know, you're a libtard, you're an idiot, like whatever, die. Okay, so anyways, like really, there's some fans of Hello Kitty out there, and we gotta like be careful. And then someone tweeted, yeah, what do they do in your country, like when they're chopping people's hands off, like for buying Hello Kitty or something? And it's the infamous Muslim spin, you know? And I was like, there wasn't anything particularly Muslim about my tweet, but just knowing that I'm a Muslim, I somehow always get and I'm sure you guys get this too, right? Like you could be like, I ate this really delicious, you know, muffin today, and they'll be like, so they sell muffins in your country when they're like throwing people off of buildings or whatever, right? And they just do this spin like all of the time, and I find it really exhausting. Because I don't want to defend muffins in any other country other than this one. And also, so I think there's something about that where you're always kind of being subjected to the rules of a nebulous Middle Eastern country. It's also not identified, right? It's sort of just like everyone views the Middle East as one big brown, you know, violent blob, and, you know, and they'll be like, Tunisia, no thank you, I have my hamburgers with mayonnaise, or whatever, ketchup, that's weird, mayonnaise on a hamburger, don't do that, gross. But point is, you know, there's this kind of blanket, and and most people would just view the five of us as as being just from some nebulous violent place. Mm-hmm. And so that there's that. I'll stop rambling.
Okay. For me, I feel like it's a constant struggle upwards. And not in the way that people assume that Muslim women struggle upwards. It's like, oh, you're struggling because of who you are and what you have on your head. And I've been told that if you took that thing off your head, you'd think better. And that was right after creating a viral hashtag that was in the news for months. So apparently it really, just imagine what I could have done, apparently, according to that person, was like off. But it's always like I have to wear my identity on my sleeve. And on Twitter, I don't have a picture of myself, which is what makes me so mysterious, I guess, to people. But people naturally know from my biography that I'm Muslim. What they don't know is that I'm biracial. They don't know that half of my family is African American. They don't know that my grandfather and my great uncle served in the US military. They don't know that side of me that's proud of America, even as we have our flaws and how we treat each other, and how, like, you know, for instance, the recent crisis with the law enforcement. Even in spite of that, I'm proud of my country, I'm proud of my blood, I'm proud of who I am. But that's something that at face value is never taken when you're saying that you're a Muslim woman. It's always assumed that, oh, you're from somewhere else, go back to where you came from. And it's true, one of my parents is an immigrant, but you know, this is my country, this is where I am. And it's constantly a struggle to, like, you know, push out of that box of assumptions of who you are as a Muslim woman. And, like, you know, it's made worse by being a woman and having these intersections, like Amani said, these different intersections, particularly online, the different intersections of getting harassment. You're a woman is one thing, and then it's like, oh good, she's Muslim. It's like a 2-for-1. So it's a constant thing, it's a constant struggle.
Okay, awesome. So I'm Layla, and as a Muslim American woman who chose to cover at 10 years old, you know, I spent the 10 years before that, that part of my childhood in a world where faith didn't define who I was and what I was doing, and didn't determine my future. And when 9/11 happened, that changed things for good. And it's not a reality anymore for Muslim women today, whether you cover, you don't cover, that you will be perceived as anything but the product of a tragedy that happened years ago. So I started my company initially focused on Muslim women because I was so frustrated with how my voice and the voices of others were being silenced and stereotyped and censored. But I realized really quickly that amplifying only Muslim women's voices was in turn not recognizing the struggle of minority, you know, African American women's voices, Latina women's voices, queer voices, voices across the spectrum, and that there is a power inherent in millennial women's voices, diverse women's voices, that is just not being tapped into yet. It's easier to divide rather than it is to conquer. We're all negotiating identity. I mean, if you think about it yourself, it doesn't matter how old you are. I like to think about it like this, right? You can be 50 years old and not know where your life is going. You can be 10 years old and not know where your life is going. It's always a struggle. Same thing with identity. And so the point is you need to take that collective strength and bring it to a larger platform, which is what I'm working to do. I believe that my identity as a Muslim American woman is as an ally and in solidarity for all women demanding their voices to be heard. I have had my fair share of really poopy experiences, but I have also seen it reflected in my sisters across the different backgrounds and different faiths and different sexualities. So if I'm honest about being a Muslim American woman, and if we're all honest about being a Muslim American woman, we also need to talk about, you know, injustices and human rights issues. We need to move towards a space, both here and abroad, where everyone can be proud to be heard and to be, you know, to speak up.
Wonderful.
I kind of want to add to that discussion as well, actually, because I feel like today, being an American Muslim woman has also almost come to be defined by these like micro defenses that we have to put into play. And what I mean by that is kind of like the inverse of what a microaggression is, right? Like a micro defense, I feel like, is the subconscious precaution that we have become conditioned to take just to be able to survive this intersectionality of our identities. Like, I will never forget when a really good friend of mine, just this past 9/11 anniversary, both of us, born and raised in the States, we're Americans, both of us are Muslim women that choose to wear scarves on our heads. And she texted me in the morning and she said, "Hey, Amani, are you going to Jummah prayer today?" And I didn't think twice. I was like, of course I am, why wouldn't I? And then she said 9/11. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I didn't realize it until she said that, but I had already put thought into how I was going to navigate my day as a Muslim woman during 9/11 when there would be like heightened emotions, right? And I told her, oh yeah, I'm gonna be wrapping my hijab as a turban today because it was more religiously ambiguous than wearing my scarf in a traditional way, right? Maybe people can conceal the fact that I was a Muslim in that way. And I feel like for us, we don't really realize it, but I always have to question, why is it that we have to, as American Muslim women, take these extra precautions? You know, like, for example, I know so many of my sisters here would understand what I'm saying when I say that, you know, when we're on the subway platform, we feel this need to step far away from the edge as possible, or like with our backs against something for fear of being like shoved onto the tracks of an oncoming train because of the fact that we look different. Right? In 2013, a woman shoved a Hindu man onto the tracks because she said she hated Muslims ever since 9/11. He was a Hindu man. So it's really about how these types of, you know, different stereotypes and perceptions have been placed on our identities, are creating this imposition on our everyday lives solely to survive, solely just to get through the day.
Thank you, Imani, for pointing that out. I also want to point out that you raised, you know, the coincidental 9/11 falling on Friday. This coming year, actually, the high holy holiday for Muslims, September 11th, and that day are actually going to be most likely falling on the same day. And I could tell you that Muslim leaders across the country are thinking about this heavily and trying to figure out how do we, you know, how do we worship that day of celebration because it's a part of our faith and who we are, and how do we then make sure that our counterpart Americans don't see this as a day of celebration because we're celebrating, you know, the loss, the tragedy of 9/11. And so the organization that I'm the board president of is actually doing a lot of interfaith and cross-cultural organizing around that. And we're actually this year working with youth to actually be at the forefront of reclaiming the narrative. These children have all been born after September 11th and only know this world in the aftermath of September 11th. And so we're calling them Generation Peace, where they're actually going to be doing a peace walk that day to help people feel a sense of ownership of this country, of us working in solidarity. So thank you for pointing that out. I also want to just, it would behoove us not to acknowledge the rich African-American history within the Muslim community and the diaspora that exists within the Muslim world. Right here in the United States, 60% of Muslims are actually African-Americans, dating back pre-slavery. So it's really critical to know that Islam has been at the shores of this country from the very beginning of its founding. And this is information and history that has been seemed to have been forgotten. So that's really critical. So thank you, Kay, for pointing that out. So to move along the dialogue, I have another question for you ladies, and that is, why do you do what you do? And what drives you to take your particular perspective, which for all of you is a very public one?
Well, I never thought I'd be public or like someone that people are like, oh, you're a notable, recognizable Muslim American figure. I really never expected that at all. And I've been really trying to think about this question the past few days. Why do I do what I do? The short answer that I always give in the writing community is I work for the girl I used to be, the 12-year-old girl I used to be. I work for her, I write for her, and I write for the girls who are coming after her. I feel like this is, I made a little joke to myself last night. I was like, I'm not going to quote Hamilton, but okay, bear with me. But you know that line in my shot where it's like, rise up when you're living on your knees? You rise up and you tell your brother that he's got to rise up, and you tell your sister that she's got to rise up. I've been in this community, and I started speaking because of the sisters who told me, yes, you can be heard. Our voices are important. Our voices matter. This is our narrative. This is our story. It's our right to tell it, no matter who tells us it's not our right to tell it. So because of those sisters reaching to me, Muslim and non-Muslim sisters, I've been able to speak. I actually started into Twitter activism because of the women I was around. Eleanor, who founded We Need Diverse Books, who's still a very good friend. Aisha Saeed, who's the Muslim author of Written in the Stars, she started the hashtag protest against the canceled ABC Family pilot, Alice in Arabia, which was really problematic. Here was Aisha, who's a mom with small kids and a YA author, and she started this movement that ended up being picked up, and having ABC Family apologize and say that, you know what, we were wrong, and this is really problematic, we're going to take it back. That really pushed me forward, and talking to Aisha and having her tell me that, yeah, you can totally do this. So I want to be like that. I call myself an online big sister, and I tell people that you can totally message me, you can email me, you can ask for encouragement if you're scared, if you're worried, if you don't think your voice matters. And I want to be that person who also reaches back and pulls up that, yes, you can speak too.
I always wanted to be President of the United States, but that's not going to happen. But well, we don't know. It could. I'd be the second Muslim president. But anyway, I'm just kidding. He's not Muslim, but maybe he is. Okay. No, he's not. Of course, I would say that. No. I was always doing this comedy thing or whatever. I moved to New York City, and I was getting a degree a master's degree in African American Studies, as one does, and another one in public policy. Because you need both of those to be a comedian. And I started, kind of dabbling, because what was really happening is that while I was doing these degrees and I really believed in public service and government work, what my heart truly desired was to be in comedy and an actor. And I would go to these auditions, and I remember going to an audition where the casting director said to me, it was an audition for me to be the woman clapping in the background behind people that were at a casino table. And I don't want to brag, but I did get a call back for that audition. And the casting director said, Negin, you're so great. And I was like, obviously, because I'm like a master clapper. And she's like, the problem is you're too ethnic for this part. And if we go that route, you're not ethnic enough. To which I said, I have some bronzer in my purse. Do you want me to go put it? I'll come back in, and then maybe I'll be ethnic enough. And I realized that I was going to spend a lot of time just auditioning for and not getting the part of the woman clapping in the background, and that part I wanted so badly. And so I started making things because I just thought it's so stupid that we just can't have a brown person front and center, and also, what is our concept of a brown person? Do I have to, what exact shade of brown do I need to be for it to be acceptable and to be we're checking a box or whatever, or there's a diversity program on this network and here she is, and and I was never enough of any of the things, and but too much of the thing at the same time. And so I just thought I have to start making stuff for myself. And then as a stand-up comedian, when I started just telling jokes, and there would inevitably be jokes about my mother, because what stand-up comedian does not use their mother? And I'd be doing an accent and whatever, and I'd come off stage and people would be like, you're so political, and I'd be like, my mom, it's a joke about talking to my mom about STDs, is that really political? But okay, and I realized just even saying that someone is Iranian and then doing an accent, all of that stuff is just seen as political, even though it's just really dumb stuff. And so that and then meeting the kind of being told, I have a joke where, it's an old joke where, I say, I'm the children of immigrants, And my immigrant parents could be like a touch racist. And I don't know if any of you guys are children of immigrants, but sometimes that happens. And I said, my mom will call me and she'll be like, Negin, we have a new accountant. He is Indian, but that is okay because with money, he is like a Jew. And so it's just like a double insult, compliment, or whatever, I don't know. But, and people would come up to me after the show and either be like, oh, that's hilarious or whatever, or they would be like, oh, you're anti-Semitic. And I'd be like, what? Some of my best friends are Jew. No, I didn't say that. And so I realized that everything is overly sensitive, and we can't say anything, but we should also make our point known, but don't say anything. It's like we're in a really weird bind when it comes to discourse on race and ethnicity. And so part of why I started doing what I was doing is because I've learned how sensitive everyone is through comedy. I don't recommend that. And then I also, and it made me feel like we need to break this down. Like this has to be, and I think comedy, you attract more bees with honey, and you attract softer punches when you're wearing a clown nose. And so, so I feel like going at these issues through the lens of comedy has felt good to me.
Okay, I guess I'll go right off of your point because it kind of struck a nerve with me. So what you were bringing up about that you either speak up or you don't speak at all, but you're supposed to speak and stop talking but talk. And so I see the same thing happening in my work in developing my media company. We're trying to amplify and strengthen our voices, strengthen everyone's voices. And the world generally tells you, like, look at the positives. The positives are what's going to keep you going. But cultural change actually takes time. And I have found that negative feedback, for me, I'm a masochist, negative feedback inspires me more than positive feedback. And I'll give you a quick story that was really a joyful time for me this past June, aka Ramadan, aka the month where you're struggling really hard, but God decided that I was going to get hit with a hammer too. So last year I was tapped to serve on a countering violent extremism task force for the Department of Homeland Security. And for anyone in the room that is familiar with that, those usually represent programming that is typically not influenced or there is no Muslim in the room when they make those laws, they make those policies. It's usually a group of white dudes. Why do I say this? I was the only Muslim millennial woman in a group of white dudes talking about how Muslim millennials, just get their moms to talk to them. And I was like, actually, that doesn't really work. And I can say that because I am a millennial. And so in working with these individuals, I kept thinking to myself, okay, I have to hold myself accountable because if I'm standing in front of the Muslim American community, in front of my own faith community, I need to be able to say that what I did is something that I did on behalf of the community. So the report draft comes out, and I'm like, oh my God, there are things in here that I'm not ethically fine with. So I told them, hey, can you take my name off the report? Name wasn't taken off of the website. Report hits the internet, and it goes, my name goes viral. And I'm laughing because it's so sad. Basically, some dude at the Daily Caller, which if you know what it is this crazy right-wing blog. I'm gonna say blog, and I'm also call him a dude because he's not a reporter. Found that my name sounded really exotic. Looked up my Twitter profile, realized that I am under the age of 30, that I wear a headscarf, and that I like to tweet about things like fighting against sexism, racism, bigotry, whatever. Did a Twitter search of the words white and 9/11, found my tweets against The Bachelor. I love that show, but come on, you gotta choose someone that's less homogenous than like the next farm boy that's coming on the show. And the fact that in 2014, I tweeted out, 9/11 changed the world for good. It's up to us to have conversations about our differences and move forward. Everyone and their mother on the bigoted side decided that I said 9/11 changed the world for the good, right? So it went from this woman was serving on the DHS task force and let's send thousands of tweets at her, tweets, death threats, whatever, you know, pigs, etc. I'm like, I'm not. I've eaten bacon like before. I accidentally, when I was 3 years old, I ate it, and my parents were like, spit it out. I was like, it's good. Okay, so went from that to, you know, Islamic terrorists elected I was the head of the DHS for a certain part of this craziness. I was like, damn, you know, that's a great, you know, Obama appointed me. I haven't even met the man. I get to meet him soon, but I haven't met the man, but apparently he appointed me. And so,
He's Muslim.
what?
Well, he's Muslim.
Yeah, you know how it is. So throughout all of this, I had to call the police. They told me death is inevitable when I showed them death threats. Twitter didn't do anything. But what I got from that was this uprising of what someone called was the silent majority of individuals that, even though trolls were literally coming at me from, like, you can do a Google search of me if you want to be sad. Do that, or do a Twitter search of mentions, and you will find thousands and thousands of tweets and articles. But the whole point is I realized that the fact that I was pissing off so many people and causing such a severe backlash for being a visibly Muslim woman sitting in a room influencing policies that would influence my faith community and the future of America at large, because I'm American and I'm Muslim and I'm a woman. And all those factors angered people so much so that I beat out Hillary Clinton as the top search on Snopes for rumors. And I got to have a call with the founder of Snopes to explain that I was not, in fact, an Islamic terrorist elected after the Orlando shootings, which are a horrific tragedy. So I have my own Snopes page. So while it was difficult for me to be attacked, I knew that it meant something, right? I mean, you got to find the good in it somehow, because it was just, I was being attacked on what I was perceived to be. The fact that the 9/11 tweet would have been totally innocuous. And by the way, if you haven't taken third grade grammar, please do, because for good, it is in the dictionary as meaning permanently. So while it was difficult to be attacked on my perceptions, it taught me how important it was to have a voice, to make sure that other voices are being amplified, like straight on. And the fact that we need to move towards a United States where a girl like myself, or a woman, can sit on a panel like the panel that I sat on without fear of backlash or her own personal Snopes article.
Leila, that was really an incredible story. And as I'm sitting here, I was thinking about my own experience when I founded the Khalil Gibran International Academy, and being attacked, brutally attacked, both on the internet. But what was more chilling for me was actually the physical following and stalking of individuals, where they formed a coalition called Stop the Madrasa Coalition. That literally followed me to every public event and berated me with horrible questions of, like, you know, are you separating the boys from the girls? Are you teaching the kids to hate, you know, Christians and Jews? Are you closing the school for Eid? You know, are you going to have halal food? And my response to them, it's a New York City public school, no different than any other school. And it's sad and unfortunate, but I'm glad that you saw that, your experience, as a way to really uplift yourself and maintain integrity in the work that you do, and really do what you do best. And it takes a lot of strength. And that comes from the rich history of your family, your tradition, you know, your spirituality that really helps you. Because I know for myself, if it weren't for my spiritual upbringing and connection to my family and my community, I don't know how I would weather it. And I still think about it till this day. It's really incredible. And it's a testament to women, right? To our womanness.
Have we all gotten death threats? Oh, sweet. That's like
Just about.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely got that.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
They're the best.
I mean, it's
Literally.
just why? It's such a waste of everyone's energy. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually want to go off of what you were talking about when it comes to you just sharing personal experiences and people taking them as being very political, right? I think that that's really the seed where Muslim Girl started. It's that the personal is political at this time, So it's important for us to get very, very personal. And I think that it was really important for us to create a platform where Muslim women could amplify their own voices and have a fighting chance at the airwaves with all these non-Muslims, oftentimes non-men, doing all the speaking on their behalf, talking over them, talking about them, talking around them. And when that happens, it's so easy to turn Muslim women into a monolith, so that these like diverse experiences, these diverse voices get really just all shoved together, and we get generalized, we get, policies implemented on our backs as if we are all one and the same. And I think that, part of it is the fact that it's not a coincidence that there isn't a Black Muslim woman on this panel, right? Like, I think that that's exactly the point. It's showing that we come from all walks of life, that Muslim women come from all races, all backgrounds. And even as American Muslim women, I think it really does have a lot to do with the visibility that all of us have garnered with our work in media, that we have satisfied like some type of, mold in order to get that attention, right? Like usually it has to be like satisfying some type of like Western standard of beauty that we're like light-skinned. Or it has to do with even just like the way that we dress. For people to regard us as American Muslim women, we have to be able to combine modest fashion with like American fashion trends and really be able to balance that tightrope. And it really begs the question, why is it that these expectations are imposed on us? Why is it that we have to conform to a certain type of narrative in order for it to be heard? And for me personally, like the death threats that come, like one of the things that I have been exposed to online recently, which I think is hilarious, is that people have accused me of being a white woman that's really just posing to be a Muslim woman, as if the two are mutually exclusive. Do you get that?
Like the last week.
I think that I think what that comes from is people not being able to comprehend a Muslim woman not fitting inside that box that they expect her to be in, of how she should look, or how she should sound, or how she should act. And it's really important for us to like break out of that. And every time we are, they try to squeeze us into it, it's important for us to like push back. And the way that we do that is by getting more of those diverse narratives into the picture. Because at the end of the day, it's the stories that make us human. And the more personal that we get, the more we, I hate to even like say it this way, but like the more that we humanize ourselves to people that otherwise would be dehumanizing us as this monolith. And it's those stories that bring us together. It's going that deep into the personal that's able to make that political impact.
Yeah, I think that we are living in a time which is really, really incredible, and that's, the internet and social media, and really being able to tell those narratives and those stories. Mm-hmm. It would behoove us to not acknowledge, the giants, that we stand on their shoulders, other American Muslim women and Muslim women globally who've like paved the way and done incredible groundbreaking work, who, for your general mainstream average Joe Schmo would not even know or have an idea about. But then, come this social media world, we have your voices, and we have very unique and diverse voices. And a point that you made, Amani, that I wanted to also talk about, and you, Nagin, is that, a Muslim woman's spirituality is not defined by the amount of clothing that she wears or the minimal amount of clothing that she wears, right? No one can go into your heart and measure your spirituality, or in your mind and measure your spirituality. And that's something that I think that we all are fighting to get people to understand that we dress differently, and you can't put us in a box. And you have to recognize that there are Muslims from all over the globe. There are women who are Chinese who are Muslim, who are Latinas that are Muslim, white women, Italian women who are Muslim, African American, and the list goes on. And the thing that we need to help people understand is that there is no specific criterion of being a Muslim woman. We all dress differently. We express ourselves differently. We in the green room were talking about the colors, and I was like, wow, I'm the loudest of all of you. But then thank God that Kate came in and she helped neutralize the situation here. So it's really critical to really see the diversity. And also the political positions, you know, and the opinions that the American Muslim community is not monolithic. And that's something that we, you know, struggle with all the time, especially with the situation that you were talking about, sitting on this panel where, you know, everybody's like, well, we're Muslim and we should not be, you know, supporting this. And I'm like, okay, we're Muslim, but you shouldn't be telling me what I should think.
Can I just say too, like, there's so much pushback. I mean, the idea, there's so much pushback to that, and of letting us like be more diverse, or just like presenting a different narrative. And just a quick example of that is like and you know, this was reported on, so sorry if you already know this, but basically, I had to sue the MTA. Has anyone ever sued a major state agency before?
Yes, right here.
Right. Yes, you have. High five. Death threats and lawsuits. Okay. So like we tried to put up a bunch of funny Muslim posters that just to show that Muslims are like funny and delightful, and also to promote my last film, The Muslims Are Coming. And so me and Dino Bidala launched this thing, and we raised the money, blah, blah, blah. We went to the MTA. The MTA, you know, we worked with them for 5 months, and they scrutinized every aspect of these posters, which I was just thinking, like, if this was an Avengers movie and we had a deadline, like, would you be scrutinizing the because they kept pushing. I mean, it lasted, just them looking at our posters took something like 6 months. And, which is crazy, right? Because you would never think, like, you know, that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's movies, like, go through that kind of scrutiny or whatever. But okay, when we worked with them at every step of the way, they were like, you can't use this font, you can't use this color, you can't, you know, like, we couldn't use the words poop or genitals. That cut out, like, half of our material. So we worked with them at every step of the way. Then they approved the posters, and then 2 days after the posters were supposed to go up, they decided to ban the posters citing political content. And this is, again, one of those things where, you know, that I mentioned before, of just like the mere mention of the word Muslim is political, and it frustrates me, because of the posters, if you look at them, you know, one of the posters said, you know, facts about Muslims, fact, Muslims invented the concepts of a hospital, fact, grown-up Muslims can do more push-ups than baby Muslims, fact, Muslims invented Justin Timberlake. So it's just like these really ridiculous. Another one said, you know, the ugly truth about Muslims, they have great frittata recipes. And so either, you know, frittatas were deeply political for the MTA, or, you know, just the mere mention of the word Muslim, you know, got us to that point. And so we had to, you know, sue them. And it's like, I'm a comedian, I don't want to, like, and like, it's harrowing. And anyways, luckily, we had a nice law firm that did the parts that required legal knowledge. But it's a strangely uphill battle, especially when you're just talking about something as completely innocuous as frittatas. And then the posters, you know, we won the lawsuit, and the posters finally went up in the subway system, and in April, May, and no one cared. What people did to these posters was draw penises on them, which is a New Yorker's God-given right, you know? And that's all that we expected, and that's what happened. So what was why is there so much resistance?
Well, we know that there is a small segment, right? A segment of individuals and interest groups that create all of this hysteria. So you are actually helping me segue to the next question that I'm about to ask all of you. How is the current political climate, affecting your work, your sense of identity, and or your personal life? Have you seen any changes in the public response to you and your work? And then the follow-up question that I want to ask you, if you may speak to it when you do speak, is if you had a message for the presidential candidates, what would it be? And I'm not mentioning the name of that person, but we all know who I'm talking about.
I feel bad to say this, but some stuff actually hasn't changed. Like, okay, you're a Muslim woman online. Okay, you say something. Yes, there are going to be people jumping down your throat. That hasn't changed. Like, before Trump, after Trump, it hasn't changed. But I really think that it should be making us more determined, that there are some people who are unfortunately miseducated about what being Muslim means and what we stand for. And even someone who is like, someone you would expect to know more, like someone who is in a position of authority even, you would expect them to know more. I sometimes feel bad because I think it's the lack of diverse education that makes us reach this point of hatred. So to me, it just makes me more determined that we have to push forward and we have to make our voices part of the narrative. And I'm actually one of the debut authors on the new Simon & Schuster's imprint for young Muslim stories. It's not for Muslim people specifically, it's for everybody. But editor Zareen Jaffrey, who is a Muslim editor at Simon & Schuster, she wanted to make that space. And her making that space happened right when Islamophobia started reaching like one of its usual peak highs again. So I've really learned from her because she so delicately steps around questions that make it, or like make an assumption that she made this space just because of Islamophobia when it's something that she's been planning for years. And I think that, it's always assumed that we react to Islamophobia when we just want those spaces for ourselves and we want people to know. I really feel like Muslims are really an open people and a loving people and just people, pretty much, people who follow a specific religion. That's really the only difference a lot of the time. So being able to pick up those boundaries that, a certain narrative has set in place, I think that is really important, and that's what I keep focusing on.
I'll say that just one of my reactions to the current presidential selection. So I like to sort of like take a policy and then test it to its natural limits. And one of the things I did not too long ago after Donald Trump talked about the Muslim registry and ban on Muslims, whatever, he continues, he loves it, whatever. I went out onto the streets of New York. I did this with MoveOn.org, and I conducted what I call the bacon test, and I asked people like, hey, are you Muslim? And if they said no, and I would be like, prove it, and they'd have to eat from a cold pile of bacon. And then if they didn't eat the bacon, then they had to sign a Muslim registry, which looked like a bridal registry. It had like flowery writing on it and whatever, little stars. And then, and some people were like, oh, I'm vegan, so I'm not gonna eat the bacon. And I was like, you're Muslim. And so, anyways, I have that registry at home if anyone needs to see it in law enforcement. But so and so I feel like in general it's important to kind of say, okay, this is your policy, now let's really like test it. Also, it happens to be unconstitutional, religious tests are. So anyway, the whole I was violating the Constitution, but it's fine. I still have the registry. So I feel like that, it's scary because he could become our president. So anyway, it's just real scary, that's all.
Layla or Amani?
Oh yeah, okay, so you totally squished two questions into one. That was very devious. So, I'm kidding. All right, so current political climate, it's a bushel of fun. I think it just highlights the need for us all to come together. I'm being really cutesy these days. So, we've seen the efforts and the intensified efforts of Black Lives Matter. These are efforts that have been around for hundreds of years, not under the same hashtag, but these are efforts that our work as Muslim American women, our work as just Americans generally, whatever identity you ascribe yourself to, our prerogative is to ally with those fighting for that cause because it is an American cause. And that's what my work with The Tempest really exemplifies, is moving beyond allyship to something like action. And how does creating the space factor in? Two key things. First and foremost, it's important to have a voice and a platform in America, and the Tempest is a unified platform. So, I get the occasional email where someone's like, I really don't agree with this article, but I still read your site. I'm like, okay, great, like keep coming back. So my job is to create a space where another woman can come along and build off of that. I'm not here to stick around and, like be a dictator. So rather than standing on the sidelines, it's incredibly important for us to create impetus for change in policies and for the future of our nation. And that's something, that our dear old two-paid friend is really terrified of. So, with that, the Tempest, we're launching a weekly news feature because the 6 p.m. news really doesn't do much, especially when it comes to women my age, women who aren't like me or who are like me. And furthermore, my second point, it's really naive to assume that the United States, even though I am a proud US citizen now, works internationally for women's voices. Their policies are dictated by allies, right? So there are allies in the world that have policies specifically that set out to subjugate women regardless of your faith, background, sexuality, and as well as the international agenda of the US at large, it quite frequently silences women. So much like the work at the Tempest, you have to come to recognize that unless we individually speak up about the human rights abuses and human rights as a whole, we can't assume that certain voices are going to be heard. I'm not going to sit there and be like, great, I wrote an article, I put it out there on the Atlantic, and now I've changed the world. It doesn't do anything. People forget my name as soon as they've read the piece. So it's really up to us to work to institute these policies. So, it's why I accepted the appointment to the DHS, which for the senator that is currently asking for me to be removed from the subcommittee, I am leaving it, so great work. And why I came from the United Nations just now, from a high-level debate for human rights, where I spoke not just for Muslim women, but for humanity as a whole, because we love talking about Muslim women and where Muslim women fit in society and what Muslim women are and why we wear our headscarves, blah, 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 but we're women. Some of you are women, some of you are dudes, and the reality is that if we're not pushing humanity forward, we're really disenfranchising everybody.
So when it comes to how the current political climate has impacted our lives, I will say that this past December, when Donald Trump decided to get up on his pulpit and declare that banning all Muslims from entering the country would be a good idea, for the first time ever at MuslimGirl.com, we felt compelled to publish a crisis safety manual for Muslim women. Now, simply the fact that a resource like that has to exist is terrifying. It's mind-boggling. And I think that it really speaks to just the heightened degree of the way violence has been imposed on our bodies and the way that we need to take these extra precautions simply to survive. It reached the boiling point where Muslim women born and raised here in the States could no longer walk the streets of their hometowns feeling safe. These resources had, like hotlines to keep in your phone in case something were to happen. They gave advice to Muslim women to make sure that your phone is always charged when you leave out of the house, in case you need to record something if you're a victim of a hate crime. Like, why is it that we need to take these precautions just to step out of our homes? And for me personally, it really just took me back to what it was like being an elementary school student, a little girl when 9/11 happened, and just the devastating impact that had on the way that my identity was developing as a Muslim American girl, the way that it forced me to feel alienated, not just from the society around me, but also from my religion itself, because of all of the headlines that were on the news and all this white noise making a lot of headache around me, and I really just could not see a clear picture. And for me personally, I think that my biggest concern and what I think about every single day is really the little girls that are going to have to grow up through this again, and how our work with with platforms like MuslimGirl.com and all the other incredible works coming out of the millennial Muslim space, how those works can prevent that from happening again, how they can really end that cycle, because it cannot continue. And one thing that I would say to our current presidential candidates, no matter who they are, it's not really just one person that I would address this to, because unfortunately I feel like no matter which way the elections go this November, it's communities of color that have lost already. Because we're the ones that have been used as pawns in this current election cycle. We're the ones that have been, placed on a political platform of a policy position, like our livelihoods. And I would say that no matter who wins, we're not going anywhere. We're not leaving this country. We're not going to go seek immigration to Canada or wherever. This is our country too, and we're not going anywhere. So they're going to have to deal with us.
Thank you, Imani. Now I'm going to let the audience deal with you. So we're going to open up for question and answer. Meredith has a mic. If you can just raise your hand, she's going to come around and give you the mic to ask a question. I ask you to please be brief in your commentary and ask a question, so that way we can get as many people as possible. And then I have one last final closing question for the panelists to close the panel. Meredith.
Hello, my name is Destiny. Thank you for speaking so candidly and so passionately. I am going to assume that a lot of people here basically think the same way. We're very open-minded. We really care about the lives of people of color, people of other religions, Muslim, Jewish, etc. And I find myself, in the wake of a lot of crises. When I post on social media, when I have these conversations, it's usually with the same people who kind of care about these things as well. And a lot of times we need to bring in other people who don't have these same points of view and be able to have conversations. So how do you propose, or how would you suggest, we can do that and have these conversations outside of the communities of people who think like us?
Well, actually, I was in your position in 2013. The Femin protests, nobody remembers the name anymore. It's the topless ladies that were like, let's save all Muslim women, and they were like, woo! And I'm like, I love your boobs, but you don't need to take care of me. I'm good with it. So initially, 2013, just graduated, what's life, trying to figure it out. I had Facebook, right? And I used to post statuses, be like, 50 likes, crap, I changed the world. And what I realized is that Facebook is an echo chamber. Social media is generally an echo chamber. Whatever I love the statuses. I'm saying this very sardonically. When someone's like, defriend me if you like Trump. And I'm like, you've literally now curated your list to ensure that nobody who does like Trump could ever have their mind changed. So what I did in 2013 was I found Arianna Huffington's email back when HuffPo was a really big thing. Sorry, I'm throwing shade because I run a media company. So I found her email and I said, hey, I'm a Muslim woman and I'm kind of frustrated with what's being said. I'm a feminist and I'd like to speak out. She responded, and I was like, whoa, as a college grad, you're like, what is life? So she was like, sure, yeah, write an article and we'll put it up. I wrote the article, it's called I Am Not Oppressed, and I put on my Facebook, I was like, oh, mama, baba, aka mom, dad, can you share this? I thought my friends would see it. It exploded. It went viral. I got thousands of horrific comments. It was the best day of my life. But the point is that if you are tired of being in an echo chamber, it is so easy. And the funny thing is people make it seem so difficult to go out there and get your voice out, and that's my little, it's a conspiracy to keep, especially diverse women's voices, silenced, because it is so flipping easy to go and pitch your story to a media outlet. So if you want to influence people, go into policy, go into media. If there isn't a door, if there isn't an internship, just freaking bam down the wall. Like, nobody is ever going to hand you on a silver platter, here you go, like, your voice matters. You have to go out and take it. So that's what I was saying.
Oh, sorry. Go for it.
sorry.
No, go for it.
I would say don't assume that you're not reaching out and you're not reaching people. You might have to encourage the people who agree with you to spread out and talk to other people, you know, family members, for instance, like, you know, are they having these conversations with them? Because Yes All Women started within the young adult writing community. It started as me talking to my friends and just tossing it out to two other YA blogger friends. And then they retweeted, and then they retweeted, and then somehow Kerry Washington found it, and she retweeted. And then that's when things started going. But she wouldn't have seen it unless someone she happened to follow had suddenly started, and then it was like, boom, it's trending. But you have, like, I wouldn't assume that, you know, people aren't, like, you know, they don't have the power to expand out of that echo chamber, and then you'll realize that, oh, you know, sometimes even a friend, I have some friends who have told me that, you know, why authors, we think that, you know, authors, everybody, you know, knows everybody, but for some authors, they have told me that I'm the first Muslim friend they've had that they can speak frankly with, that they can, like, you know, message at 9 o'clock at night and be like, you know, hey, I had a question about this representation in my novel. So, you know, you never really know. And it's just like a matter of, like Layla said, you know, reaching out, speaking out, and encouraging that, you know, hey, do you talk about this with other people? Do you want to have, like, a discussion one day and we can, like, bring other people in and see what they're feeling unsure about, what they don't even know? You know, like that. That was my suggestion.
I just want to say that, you know, I think for people who don't have kind of like grandiose plans of becoming like a well-known writer or whatever, I'm a big fan of meeting your neighbors. And if you, I mean, you should read the work of Robert Putnam. He wrote this incredible book called Bowling Alone, and talking about social fragmentation, the decaying of social capital, and what that means. And I think what that means is essentially it breeds these kinds of fringe ideologies that tend to be like hateful ideologies, right? And so just an example of how I think just literally meeting your neighbor helps build civic fabric. My parents are Iranian, a little weird about the Jews, and they got a Jewish neighbor. And I actually talk about this whole issue in this little anecdote in How to Make White People Laugh, which is available in the gift store. But basically, they get this Jewish neighbor. The Jewish neighbor comes over and presents them with a rum cake, right? And my parents were like, oh, that's wow, you know, and now the rum cake was moist and delicious, and was it made from the blood of Christian babies? Maybe, but they were just like, they were so overcome, like, oh my God, what a wonderful gesture, whatever. And then cut to like a week later, they're like having coffees, whatever, they're making plans, and then my mom calls me, she's like, you know, Jewish family is just like Iranian family, and I'm like, yeah, lady, every family is like every fucking family. What, did you need a rum cake to figure that out? And the thing is, she did need a rum cake to figure that out. And maybe that's what John Kerry is missing from the peace process. But anyway, what I think we're really missing, just when it comes down to like the absolute nuts and bolts, is that we're really not meeting our neighbors, really not meeting the people across the street, the people across the town, or whatever. And I started, and here's a really, again, and it sounds so reductionist, and I hope it doesn't come off that way, even though it feels that way. I started doing this thing just for myself, where when I'm standing in line with someone, you know, at a thing or wherever, I'm on the subway, and I look at someone's dress or whatever, and I like the dress, instead of thinking like that's a nice dress, I actually out loud give them the compliment. It's like this, and I have intense amounts of social anxiety around it, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm just gonna talk to this, they're gonna think I'm an asshole, you know, whatever. But they, 9 times out of 10, and so far 10 times out of 10, actually really appreciate it. And I think we're losing that as Americans, this kind of familiarity with each other. And then, so fist bump thy neighbor, that's what I think.
I would also like to add to that I think that this is where harnessing our allies would be exceptionally powerful. I think that it's really important for us to recognize the privileges that we individually hold in different spaces, and how much of an impact we can individually make when we speak to and communicate with people from similar backgrounds as us. Because where I'm coming from with that is that for us, for members of the minority communities that are being targeted, or the ones that are being misunderstood or whatever, it's really unfair and emotionally taxing for us to have to assert our humanity over and over and over again. And it should not be our responsibility to engage a person to prove to them, like, look, you should care about our human rights just as much as people that look like you. And when that situation arises, for me personally, like, I always appreciate when my allies like step in and they're like, they can tell that I just don't have the patience or the emotional capacity to like deal with the person at a certain time. And they're the ones that do that speaking on my behalf. They're the ones that try to make that communication happen. Just recently, I posted a status on Facebook, and I was sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts. And there was a table next to me of these white people, and they were really huge Trump supporters. And they made it a point to be very outspoken about it in my presence, like to the extent where they were making eye contact with me and talking about how important their Second Amendment rights were to them, and how if they shoot first, then we have to shoot back, and other threatening comments of that nature. And one thing that I really appreciated was that one of my friends commented that status. Everyone was like, oh my God, Maddie, like, what did you say back? Like, of course you had to say something. And like, no, I definitely didn't. I was not gonna allow myself to be instigated by that. But one of my friends who was a white girl, she like commented it, and she said, if I was there, then I would have engaged with my fellow white people and tried to explain to them why this is wrong, like why their behavior is creating an unsafe space for the people around them. That was something that I deeply appreciated. And in that same token, I think that engagement is really important, and for us to remember that a lot of times, when people act in a way that to us is really like either racist or problematic or whatever, a lot of times it's coming from some type of line of reasoning that makes sense to them, or they feel like they're right for some reason. And we're all bonded by that, right? Like, we think that we're right for a reason. And one example that comes to mind is some really good friends of mine at this production studio called Peace House. They made a video that they posted on Facebook that went viral called Dear Trump Supporters. It got 30 million views so far. I'm sure some of you in this room might have even stumbled upon it, but it started out as a prank where they wanted to act like they were Muslim Trump supporters. They went into a Trump rally, and they really wanted to make like this funny video out of it. But what they ended up discovering was that they started bonding with the other Trump supporters there. And there were people there that were actually really eager to meet them as Muslims and to understand them, to get to know them. And it made them realize that there is this desire to build bridges and a desire for us to really just have this type of like unity amongst us. But unfortunately, it is the misunderstandings that end up dividing us at the end of the day.
Hi, so I've heard the word feminism mentioned a couple of times, and I was just very curious about, do you feel pressure at all to be representatives of feminism, and how does your work tie into the feminist movement? And what are your thoughts about the feminist movement in the US right now? I know those are 3 questions, but take any or all.
I'm personally like super passionate about the feminist movement, and I do identify as a Muslim feminist, though a lot of times I add a disclaimer to that I feel like the term Muslim feminist is redundant. It's an oxymoron, because I feel like being a Muslim is innately being a feminist, because our religion founded the principles of gender equality that we refer to today as feminism. I don't necessarily feel a pressure to identify as feminist, though, because I feel like the movement really developed in a way that left a lot of us behind. It was very exclusionary. It did not represent a lot of our narratives or the very diverse issues and problems that we were facing. And a lot of times, even, the feminist objectives came at our own expense, like on our backs. And I think that that's something that's cast a lot of people out of the movement, but I'm very excited to see how much it is transforming today, and it is creating, I wouldn't say that the movement is creating space, I would say that young women today are forcing a space for themselves within feminism. They are expanding it and really just reshaping the lexicon. The United States of Women Summit at the White House, I think, was a very clear example of that. And I was invited to speak there, and for me personally, it meant a lot to have the Muslim feminist thought be represented alongside women like Gloria Steinem, who's a mother of the feminist movement, right? Or Shonda Rhimes, who's doing exceptional work for the representation of black women today. And I really think that it's just a marker to show how much young people are coming in and reclaiming that movement for themselves.
So I'll just really quickly piggyback off of that. So I identify as feminist, right? But I don't there are two different movements, or actually a multitude of movements, but I identify as an intersectional feminist. And if you don't know what an intersectional feminist is, and you're thinking about feminism as a whole, unfortunately, has been co-opted in the American space and also in the international space under the term white feminism. And if you think I'm throwing a rock at you, please don't let it hit you. What I mean by white feminism is that it is not taking into account the differences in sexualities, gender identities, faith backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, what have you, and instead pushes forth an agenda that at times devalues the differences of the people that are in the movement. So as an intersectional feminist, I think, and just as Amani said, I mean, being Muslim and being feminist is an oxymoron, because even though a lot of Muslim dude bros are really not happy about that, there was this one dude hitting on me once, and I was like, did you know that Islam is feminist? He was like, what? And he stopped talking to me again, never again. And I was like, thank you, goodbye. So there's a difference between intersectional and white feminism, and I think that unless we start having conversations around that, then we're kind of stripping ourselves of the opportunity to help everyone and not just a certain agenda.
Next question.
My name is Ursula Hahn. I have a question for Dr. Almontazer. When you were planning this program and put your panel together, did you think of including someone of the generation of these young women's mothers, or to present maybe a different viewpoint? Mm-hmm. Did you try to do this and you were repulsed? Mm-hmm. I'd really be interested in.
Sure. I'm happy to answer that question and candidly to you. First, I actually am not the sole planner of the panel. It was planned by the Brooklyn Historical Society program department, and I was asked to moderate. And so, if we can do things differently, I would certainly say that we needed someone up here who's of African American background, and also even someone who is of Latina background, because that's a very large and growing community in the Muslim community. Secondly, in regards to the cross-generational, I totally agree with you, and that's why I had commented that it would behoove us not to acknowledge, the giants that we stand on their shoulders today. So I do want to say that I certainly am not the age of any of these women, except for Nagin. I don't know, but I think I'm still older than her. But I can tell you that that any of these three here can actually be my daughter. I have a 20-year-old daughter. Layla and my daughter know each other. And so I feel this sense of cross-generational dialogue happening here, but we certainly can benefit from it. And as I mentioned earlier, there are really incredible women who we stand on the shoulders of. A prime example of that, who is someone that lived in Brooklyn and in New York City, is Dr. Betty Shabazz, the late Malcolm X's wife, and the extraordinary work that she did as a Muslim and an African American woman. Dr. Amina Wadud, whose scholarship has, brought her, on the international stage for being the first woman to lead a female prayer. Dr. Amina McLeod, who is in Chicago, or Dr. Ingrid Madison, who actually was the first woman to be the president, not for just 2 terms, which the organization only has 2 terms, but 3 terms by popular demand of the Islamic Society of North America. So there is a great deal of scholarship and activism within the Muslim Women's League, if you want to call it that. So thank you for that question, and I think that's really, maybe we could do a part 2 panel.
Absolutely. I think I have time for one more question.
Good evening, ladies. Just want to say that I come from a family where we have half the family is Christian, the other half is Muslim, and we have a good time when we all get together. And we have some Buddhists there, sprinkled in there somewhere. But what I wanted to know was, you know, there are times when I look at Muslims that live here in New York City in particular, but the United States, and I do see very independent women who are highly educated, they're out here, they're doing their thing. But I also want to look at what's going on in other parts of the country with women there. And I want to know if you feel that how you are portraying Muslim women here in America, does that have any effect on what is going on with Muslim women in other parts of the world? I'm not going to say the Middle East because I know Muslims live all over, but in other parts of the world, how is this being, how do you think you are affecting their ability to be independent and fully express?
Well, I'm going to let any of you answer, but I just want to say that, you know, there are some Muslim countries that have actually had presidents, female presidents before us, and I can name at least 4 or 5 of them, but I'm going to let the panelists respond.
Well, first of all, hi to you, because my family is half Christian. I have Christian family members, including my grandmother. And I would like to say that I feel that, you know, our representation here and the way we actively talk here, it does portray how things actually are in Muslim countries. And I think there's this misunderstanding that, you know, Muslim countries aren't just purely affected by Islam and Islam's teachings and not by culture. And like, you know, even like Western cultures, some aspects have gotten into there now too. And so for instance, in Bangladesh, there is a female prime minister. There was a female prime minister before her. And if you go to Bangladesh, for instance, that's where I have most experience with, so that's why I'm using it. You see a lot of women, you know, who are getting educated and going and like, you know, working in different fields. And so it's not this portrayal that they give that, you know, Muslim women, there are Muslim women who stay at home, and I respect that. I deeply respect that. My mother stayed at home with me. That is a respectful position. But there are also these women who are going out and doing stuff, and that's equally respectful. And we have a history and a heritage in Islam of Muslim women being the educational leaders and the leaders of different, you know, different breakthroughs. Like for instance, I don't know if anybody saw the news that the oldest library in the world has just been opened for visitors again in Morocco. And that was founded by Fatima al-Fihri, who was a Muslim scholar. And she founded the first university that hosts the library. So we do have this tradition, and Muslim women, if you talk to them, they have this understanding that yes, this is where we came from and this is where we're going to continue on. And I know that, you know, as Americans, we have a particular American focus and American experience, but I think I can safely say that, you know, we are aware, like, universally that, you know, this is our background, this is where we came from.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off of that really quickly because I'm an immigrant and also part of my family is Christian. My mom actually converted when she was 16 to the dismay of her Muslim dad, converted to Islam, not to Christianity. So he was just like, what's going on? So I know relatives and individuals that who live in the Middle East, who live in, because I'm half Syrian, half Danish, right? So I'm only going to speak from my personal experiences. The reality is that understand that what you're seeing in the media specifically is used to push policy decisions that are harmful in those countries. And it's this kind of, think about Aladdin, right? Jasmine was this enslaved princess, and she was this, you know, she had to be saved. She had to be saved by the man. Now think about what happened with Afghanistan. Think about what happened with Iraq. You have all of these countries in which prior to military action, women in those countries were portrayed as oppressed, as being forced to stay at home. And regardless of whatever political situation the country was in, there's always disruptive women in those areas. And I also will piggyback off of that off of what Kay said, that I don't see any shame in a woman choosing to stay at home and raise her kids. My mom raised 8 children and now runs a multi-million-dollar NGO. She still has 5 kids at home, and she does it on her own with my dad supporting her. And she was a homemaker for many years. So I think it's difficult because we, yes, I have inherent privileges as an American, but I could also choose to adhere to oppressive cultural traditions that would force me into situations if I don't adhere to religious traditions, because my role models are the badass Muslim women that were around when the religion first started. The first female, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he married a badass entrepreneur. Like, she owned businesses, and he was this poor dude. Like, he married her. And then you have...
Well, she asked him to marry her.
She asked him to marry her. Yeah, by the way, she asked him to marry her. Then you have...
And she was older, too.
Yeah, and she was older. She knew what she had her ish together. She just did what she wanted to do. I mean, you had women leading armies, women teaching groups of men. All of these are in our history, are in our blood, and it's so difficult to then go and say, well, what about oppressed Muslim women today? Because it's not because they're Muslim. It's because they're stuck in cultural issues, and they're also stuck in a world where politics is difficult and where there are oppressive policies that are keeping them in place. So it's just, if I was growing up in Syria, things would be different now, but I would likely be just as educated as I was, in 2012, which is when I graduated. So it's just it's just forcing you to just tweak things a little bit, because we can all say, American women are oppressed because they can't even go outside without being at potential of being sexually assaulted. If you want to spin it, you can say the same thing about American women as you can say about women abroad.
Okay.
I want to add that this is something that we at MuslimGirl.com have put a lot of thought into, because we recognize that our narratives are very commonly Western narratives. We are literally saturated in privilege from the position from where we speak, right? And I think that owning that is something also that is very powerful. We would never claim to speak on the behalf of Muslim women in other parts of the world who are not already represented within our spheres. But the thing is right now we're navigating, a global climate that is the height of Islamophobia in recent history. We are living in a country that is the primary exporter of failed foreign policy in the Muslim world in recent memory. And we are the Muslims that are living in the belly of the beast, right? We're at the heart of the empire. And I think that when we recognize that and our power in that, we can really just catalyze ourselves as agents of change. And for us, we abide by the philosophy at Muslim Girl that if we're able to strengthen our voices and really amplify that platform, that empowering platform for Muslim women's narratives here, then we will be able to create a change that extends and reverberates throughout other parts of the world as well.
Thank you, Imani. And just one quick point that I wanted to make, that it's really important to know that Muslim women globally, in whatever part of the world they're at, are doing incredible work. And it's really important to recognize, 3 Nobel Peace Prize laureates, right? Shireen Ebadi from Iran, and Malala from Pakistan, who has, spearheaded for education. And a couple of years ago, Tawakkul Karman from Yemen, who is considered the mother of the Arab Spring. So these are incredible, dynamic women doing really incredible work. So I'm sorry that we can't take more questions from the audience. I'm going to close the panel by asking all of the panelists in the most succinct way to respond to this question so we can close. You are all reclaiming the narrative of Muslim women and Islam in America. What are your future goals for reshaping this narrative? Can we start with you, Imani? It's right down.
For us, the goal is to make it something sustainable and something that isn't just like malleable by the winds of the trends and what's in the news cycle.
I would say that I want to see more diversity. I know that I speak from a specific, religious interpretation, different background, and I'd like to see more Muslim women being, not feeling pressured to uphold one monolith image, but be able to speak on their own experiences.
So I'm just going to push back on that, on your question, say the work that the Tempest does as well as I do, I don't think that it's about reclaiming, it's about creating, because our narratives have never been reflected in policies and in Hollywood. They've been created by others and spoken about for us. So none of us here speak for all Muslim women. So the goal and purpose for us really is to create and hold spaces for women that come after us to be able to create change. So, yeah.
And I think my goal is really to just have Muslims associated with comedy.
And frittatas.
All right, please give them a round of applause, please. Thank you all very much. It was really incredible to hear your personal experiences, your stories, and your enlightenment. And I wish you the utmost success in future work that you're doing to reclaim and to actually, as you corrected me, to recreate. Thank you.
And thank you, Debbie, for being a pioneer and a badass.